welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're gonna be, exploring, I guess you could say, Thinking Fast and Slow
Oh, yeah.
by Daniel Kahneman.
Love that book.
And it's such a cool book because it really dives into how our minds work
Yeah.
and reveals that there are two systems, a fast and intuitive one and a slower, more deliberate one.
Right.
And that they kind of shape our every thought and decision.
It's a truly revolutionary concept, I think. He calls these two systems, System 1 and System 2,
Yeah.
right?
Oh.
And they're constantly like interacting and often even battling for control.
Yeah.
And just understanding how they operate can be so empowering.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into some of the key insights that we got out of this book. One that really caught my eye was the idea of heuristics, these mental shortcuts that our brain uses, like to quickly size up situations,
Right.
but they can also lead to some interesting biases.
Yeah, heuristics can be really efficient,
Yeah.
but sometimes they lead to, like you said, some pretty interesting biases. Like take the availability heuristic, for example.
Oh, yeah.
It describes how easily we recall examples to mind,
Yeah.
which impacts how frequently we think something occurs.
Right.
Like, if we've just seen a news report about a shark attack, we're suddenly much more likely to overestimate the chances of encountering a shark the next time we're at the beach,
Right.
even though statistically, those chances remain extremely low.
Right. It's almost like our brains are prioritizing the information that is most readily available, right?
Exactly.
Even if it doesn't accurately reflect the bigger picture.
Exactly. And that's where understanding these biases comes in handy.
Mm.
You know, knowing how our brains tend to work can help us make more informed decisions, especially when emotions are running high.
It makes you wonder how much of our daily lives is actually influenced by these unconscious biases.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And another really powerful concept that Kahneman explores is priming. It's the idea that exposure to one idea can subtly influence our subsequent thoughts and actions,
Right.
even without our conscious awareness.
Yeah, the example that you gave in the book about how if you see the word eat pea, you're more likely to complete the word fragment, like SO_P,
Right.
as soup rather than soap.
Soup. Yeah.
It really blew my mind.
Yeah, it really highlights how much our environment and the information we encounter can shape our behavior, right? Like marketers, for instance, leverage this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Think about catchy jingles or repetitive slogans.
Yeah.
They exploit our brain's preference for cognitive ease,
Okay.
making us more likely to believe something simply because it feels familiar.
Oh, so sneaky. So it's like those repeated exposures create a sense of comfort and familiarity, even if there's no real evidence to support the claim that they're making.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key concept, cognitive ease.
Okay.
Our brains love information that is easy to process. It's already familiar. It takes less effort, less mental energy, but this tendency can sometimes backfire, leading us to accept things as true simply because they've been repeated often enough.
Like that crazy example in the book where repeatedly hearing the phrase, the body temperature of a chicken, made people more likely to believe that a chicken's body temperature is 144 degrees.
Right.
Wild.
It's a powerful reminder to be critical of information, even if it seems plausible or it comes from a source we generally trust. Always question, always dig deeper.
Yeah, and so this tendency to jump to conclusions based on limited information is something that Kahneman calls wiseiati, right?
Wiseiati, yeah.
What you see is all there is.
Exactly.
It's a cornerstone of that System 1 thinking.
It is. Our brains are wired to create coherent stories, even if we have to fill in the gaps with our own assumptions.
Yeah, and I guess that's why first impressions can be so powerful.
Right.
And sometimes so misleading. It's like we see a sliver of someone's behavior and instantly create a whole narrative in our minds about who they are, even if we have very little information to go on.
Exactly. It's wiseiati in action.
It is wiseiati in action. So how about loss aversion?
Okay.
This one really hit home for me.
Yeah.
Because it explains, why that feeling of losing $100 could be so much stronger than the joy of winning $100.
Absolutely.
Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, it's a fundamental principle of behavioral economics.
Okay.
And Kahneman illustrates it with the example of a simple bet.
Okay.
A 50-50 chance of winning $200 or losing $100.
Okay.
Logically, it seems like a favorable gamble.
Yeah, the potential gain is double the potential loss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But most people would instinctively reject that bet.
Really?
The fear of losing $100
Yeah.
looms much larger in their minds
Yeah.
than the potential joy of winning $200.
It's like our brains are hardwired to avoid losses, even if it means missing out on potential gains.
It really is.
And I can see how this plays out in everyday life, especially when it comes to things like negotiating.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's why I hate haggling so much.
Right. Understanding this bias can be a real game changer.
Yeah.
The next time you're in a negotiation, remember that the other party's fear of loss might be even greater than your desire for a bargain.
Okay.
So use that knowledge strategically.
Ooh, good tip. Now, how about framing effects? This is all about how the way choices are presented can influence our decisions.
Yes.
It's like the same information can be spun in different ways to make one option seem more appealing than another.
It's a classic example of how our emotional responses can override our rational thinking.
Yeah.
Kahneman highlights the example of medical treatments.
Well, yeah.
People are more likely to choose a treatment with a 90% survival rate than one with a 10% mortality rate.
Even though they're conveying the exact same information.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The framing triggers different emotional responses, even if the underlying facts are identical.
So it really makes you realize how important it is to really dissect the way that information is presented, try to see through any of those potential biases. You know, don't just take things at face value. Now, let's dive into a concept that I found particularly thought-provoking.
Okay.
The remembering self versus the experiencing self.
Ah, yes. This is where Kahneman really challenges our assumptions about what constitutes a good experience.
Yeah.
He argues that the way we remember past experiences, what he calls our remembering self,
Right.
can be quite different from how we actually experience them in the moment,
Right.
our experiencing self.
So, like, our memories aren't always accurate reflections of what actually happened.
Precisely.
That's so wild. The example that he gives about the colonoscopy is so interesting.
Right.
Where patients who underwent a longer procedure, but where the discomfort at the end was less intense, actually rated the overall experience as being less unpleasant than patients who had a shorter procedure with more pain at the end.
Right. It's a fascinating illustration of how our remembering selves prioritize the peak and the end of an experience, often neglecting the duration or the sum of all those moments in between.
It's like our memories can distort our perceptions of happiness.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder, are we making decisions based on how we think we'll remember something rather than on the actual experience itself?
That's a really important question to consider.
Yeah. And speaking of things to think about, he delves into how we tend to overestimate our own abilities and underestimate the role of chance, a phenomenon that he calls the illusion of control.
It's a pervasive bias. We love to see patterns, to believe that we have more control over situations than we actually do.
Yeah.
We attribute success to our skills, and we blame failures on external factors.
Yeah.
It's a very human tendency, but it can lead to some flawed decision-making.
Well, he talks about how this illusion is particularly strong when it comes to investing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like where people often believe they can beat the market, even though there's a mountain of evidence suggesting that it's incredibly difficult to do so consistently.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is that even professionals like financial advisors often fall prey to this illusion. They have all this knowledge and experience, but they still tend to overestimate their ability to predict market movements.
It's almost like we're all drawn to the idea that we can outsmart the system, even when the odds are stacked against us.
Right. We crave that sense of agency, that belief that we can shape our own destiny.
Yeah.
But acknowledging the role of chance can actually be incredibly liberating.
Okay.
It frees us from the burden of always needing to be in control.
So if we're susceptible to this illusion of control, how do we protect ourselves from making decisions based on this false sense of power?
Well, one strategy Kahneman suggests is to take an outside view.
Okay.
Instead of getting caught up in the specifics of a situation, we need to step back and consider the base rates, or the statistical probabilities of different outcomes.
So it's about looking at the bigger picture and asking ourselves, what has happened in similar situations in the past?
Exactly.
Okay.
Rather than focusing solely on our own unique circumstances, we need to consider the broader trends and patterns that might be at play.
Got it. So it's almost like learning from the collective experience of others rather than just relying solely on our own limited perspective.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of, looking back and evaluating past events, another interesting bias that he explores is hindsight bias.
Oh, yeah.
Our tendency to look back on past events and believe they were more predictable than they actually were.
It's like that saying, hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah.
We see the outcome, and suddenly it seems obvious how we should have seen it coming.
Right. But of course, in the moment, things are rarely that clear.
Right.
And I imagine, hindsight bias can lead to a lot of unfair judgments, especially when we evaluate decisions that were made with incomplete information.
Absolutely. It's easy to criticize someone's choices after the fact when you already know how things turned out.
Right.
But understanding hindsight bias encourages us to be more forgiving of ourselves and others, recognizing that we often make the best decisions we can with the information we have at the time.
Yeah, that's a great reminder.
Yeah.
So if we're prone to these biases, like the illusion of control and hindsight bias,
Right.
what are some practical strategies that we can use to counteract them and make more rational decisions?
Well, one technique Kahneman suggests is what he calls reference class forecasting.
Okay.
It involves looking at similar projects or situations that have been completed in the past
Okay.
and using the data from those experiences to create a more realistic estimate for your own project.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like learning from the mistakes of others instead of repeating them ourselves.
Exactly.
And it seems like acknowledging our inherent biases and actively seeking out diverse perspectives are really crucial steps towards making more informed decisions.
Absolutely. And it all circles back to the interplay between our two thinking systems.
Right.
By understanding the strengths and limitations of both System 1 and System 2, we can learn to leverage their powers effectively and make choices that are more aligned with our goals and values.
Yeah, this has been so insightful.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into thinking fast and slow.
We have. There's still so much more to explore.
Yeah, and there is. So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve into even more fascinating concepts from Kahneman's groundbreaking work.
I can't wait. Welcome back. Ready to kind of continue our exploration of Kahneman's brilliant insights.
Absolutely. I'm still processing everything that we talked about in the first part.
Right.
It's amazing how much our thinking is influenced by all these unconscious biases.
It really is. And one of the most intriguing aspects, I think, that Kahneman delves into is this interplay between our two selves, the experiencing self and the remembering self.
Right, the two selves.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about that.
Well, the experiencing self is the one living in the moment,
Okay.
fully immersed in the sensations and emotions of a particular experience.
Okay.
But it's the remembering self that shapes our narratives, the stories we tell ourselves about our lives.
Oh. And Kahneman suggests that these two selves don't always agree on what constitutes a good experience.
Exactly. The remembering self often prioritizes the peak and the end of an experience,
Yeah.
neglecting the duration or the sum of all the moments in between.
Right.
Think back to like a vacation that you took.
Okay.
Do you remember every single moment?
No.
Or do certain highlights and the overall feeling at the end stand out more?
Yeah, that's so true. I tend to remember like the most exciting parts and how I felt when it was all over.
Precisely. It's as if our brains create these highlight reels of our experiences,
Yeah.
and those memories become the basis for our future choices.
Okay.
We might choose to repeat experiences that had a strong peak or a positive ending, even if the overall experience wasn't entirely enjoyable.
It's like our memories aren't always reliable guides for making future decisions.
Right.
How do we reconcile these two selves, the one living in the moment and the one crafting the narrative?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Okay.
Kahneman suggests that becoming aware of this discrepancy is the first step.
Okay.
We need to recognize that our memories can be distorted,
Okay.
that they might not accurately reflect the totality of our experiences.
So it's about being more mindful of our experiences as they're happening, rather than just relying on our memories to guide our future choices.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about savoring the present moment, paying attention to the subtle nuances of our experiences, and recognizing that even seemingly mundane moments can contribute to our overall well-being.
Yeah, this all kind of ties into, his discussion of happiness, right?
Yeah.
He argues that we often misjudge what will truly bring us like lasting satisfaction.
Absolutely. He talks about the focusing illusion,
Okay.
our tendency to overestimate the impact of certain events on our happiness.
Got it.
We fixate on a particular goal, like getting a promotion or winning the lottery,
Yeah.
believing that achieving it will like magically solve all of our problems.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we create these fantasies in our minds, imagining that achieving that one thing will finally make us happy.
Right. But Kahneman points out that these fantasies often don't match reality.
Okay.
Like studies have shown that lottery winners, for example, often end up no happier than they were before,
Really?
and sometimes even less happy.
Wow.
The initial thrill wears off.
Right.
And they often face new challenges and anxieties they hadn't anticipated.
So it's not just about achieving, specific goals, but about cultivating a sense of overall well-being.
Exactly.
Not dependent on external factors.
Exactly. True happiness comes from nurturing meaningful relationships, engaging in activities that bring us joy, and finding a sense of purpose in our lives.
Yeah.
It's about appreciating the journey, not just the destination.
Yeah. I love that perspective.
Yeah.
Now, Kahneman also touches on some broader societal implications of these cognitive biases, right?
Yeah.
He argues that understanding how our minds work is really crucial for creating better policies.
Right.
And making fairer decisions.
Absolutely. One example he highlights is the concept of framing effects in the context of organ donation.
Okay.
In countries that frame the choice to donate organs as an opt-out system.
Okay.
Where people are automatically enrolled as donors unless they explicitly choose not to be.
Okay.
Tend to have much higher donation rates than countries that use an opt-in system.
It's fascinating how, a simple change in framing can have such a profound impact on people's choices.
It really highlights the power of nudges,
Yeah.
those subtle changes in the environment that can encourage people to make decisions that are in their best interest without limiting their freedom of choice.
It seems like understanding these biases can help us design systems that are more intuitive.
Yes.
And aligned with how people actually think and behave.
Exactly. Kahneman's work has had a huge impact on fields like economics, law, and public policy.
Wow.
It's made people more aware of the limitations of human rationality and the importance of designing systems that take those limitations into account.
So if we're all susceptible to these cognitive biases, what can we do about it?
Right.
Is it possible to overcome them completely?
Well, I wouldn't say that we can eliminate them entirely. They're deeply ingrained in how our minds work.
Yeah.
But becoming aware of them is a crucial first step.
Okay.
By understanding the patterns of our thinking,
Yeah.
we could start to recognize when those biases might be influencing our judgments and decisions.
It's like becoming more mindful of our own mental processes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are a number of debiasing techniques that can help us counteract those automatic System 1 responses.
Okay.
We've already talked about taking the outside view and considering base rates.
Right.
Another helpful strategy is to actively seek out diverse perspectives.
Okay, so surrounding ourselves with people who have different backgrounds, experiences, viewpoints
Exactly.
can help challenge our own assumptions.
Yes.
And broaden our thinking.
Precisely. It's about creating an environment where diverse perspectives are welcomed and valued. That kind of intellectual humility can be incredibly powerful.
It seems like understanding our own biases is just as important as recognizing the biases that might be influencing others.
Absolutely. We're all susceptible to these cognitive traps.
Right.
Even the smartest among us can make irrational decisions.
So what's the key takeaway here? How can we apply these insights to live more fulfilling lives?
I think the most important message is that we need to be more compassionate, both toward ourselves and others.
Okay.
We need to recognize that we're all works in progress.
Yeah.
That we're all prone to making mistakes.
Right.
And that our decisions are often influenced by factors beyond our conscious control.
It's a reminder to be kind to ourselves when we inevitably, fall prey to these biases.
Exactly.
And to be more understanding of others when they make decisions that we might not agree with.
Right. We're all navigating this complex world with our own unique set of biases and experiences.
That's a beautiful sentiment.
Yeah.
It seems like, the more we understand about how our minds work.
Right. The more equipped we are to cultivate empathy and compassion and a deeper understanding of the human experience.
I couldn't agree more.
And that brings us to another key aspect of Kahneman's work, his exploration of prospect theory.
Prospect theory, yes.
I'm intrigued.
Well, it's a groundbreaking theory that challenges traditional economic models.
Okay.
By recognizing that our decisions are not always driven by pure rationality. Instead, our choices are often heavily influenced by our perceptions of risk and reward.
Right.
And those perceptions are often skewed by our emotional responses.
So it's about how we frame potential gains and losses in our minds.
Yeah, exactly. Kahneman and his collaborator, Amos Tversky, conducted numerous experiments that demonstrated how people tend to be risk-averse when it comes to potential gains.
Okay.
But risk-seeking when facing potential losses.
That sounds a little counterintuitive.
It is, yeah.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine you're offered a choice between two options. Option A, a guaranteed gain of $500.
Or option B, a 50% chance of winning $1,000
Yeah.
and a 50% chance of winning nothing.
Okay.
Most people would choose option A, the guaranteed gain,
Yeah.
even though the expected value of option B is actually higher.
Yeah, I can see that because the certainty of winning something, even if it's a smaller amount, feels more appealing
Right.
than the risk of potentially winning more, but also potentially winning nothing.
Exactly. We're wired to avoid losses,
Yeah.
even if it means sacrificing potential gains.
Okay.
But when we're faced with a potential loss,
Okay.
we often become more willing to take risks in an attempt to avoid that loss altogether.
So, like, if we're offered a choice between a certain loss of $500
Right.
or a 50% chance of losing $1,000 and a 50% chance of losing nothing,
Yeah.
we're more likely to gamble on that second option,
Exactly.
even though the expected value of both options is the same.
Right.
It's the prospect of avoiding that certain loss that makes the gamble seem more appealing. It's amazing how our emotions can so profoundly influence our decision-making, even in seemingly rational contexts like financial choices.
It really highlights the power of framing. The way we perceive a situation, whether it's framed as a potential gain or a potential loss, can dramatically impact our choices.
Yeah, this all ties back to the concept of loss aversion.
It does.
Right. That deep-seated fear of losing something we already have.
Absolutely. Prospect theory provides a framework for understanding how loss aversion shapes our decisions,
Yeah.
particularly in situations involving risk and uncertainty.
This is all so fascinating. I'm starting to see how these seemingly abstract concepts from behavioral economics actually play out in our everyday lives.
Exactly, and that's what makes Kahneman's work so compelling.
Yeah.
He takes these complex psychological principles and makes them accessible and relatable and applicable to our daily lives.
It's like he's given us like a new lens through which to view the world, a way to understand ourselves and others on a deeper level.
And that understanding can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
It allows us to make more informed decisions, navigate complex social situations, and ultimately live more fulfilling lives.
This has been such an incredible exploration of Kahneman's work so far.
It really has.
I can't wait to delve into even more insights in the next part of our deep dive.
Me neither. We'll be back soon to continue our journey through the fascinating world of thinking fast and slow.
Welcome back to the deep dive. It's really amazing how much we've learned about the inner workings of our minds in just 2 parts.
I know, it's really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, Kahneman's insights are just, they've revolutionized the way we understand decision-making, happiness, even our perceptions of the world around us.
Absolutely. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was, how our intuition, our SAS System 1 thinking, isn't always as reliable as we think it is.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly kind of balancing those 2 systems.
Right.
The intuitive and the deliberate, and knowing when to trust our gut versus, when to slow down and engage our more analytical system 2.
Yeah.
It seems like a really crucial skill to develop.
It is. And one of the most valuable things we can do is cultivate that sense of awareness around our own thinking patterns.
Okay.
Recognizing those potential biases that can creep in.
Yeah.
We can start to make more informed and rational choices.
So it's like almost becoming like a mental detective,
Yeah.
constantly questioning our own assumptions, looking for clues that might reveal these hidden biases.
Exactly. And Kahneman offers a whole toolbox of techniques, for debiasing our judgments and decisions.
Right.
We've already talked about taking the outside view, considering base rate, seeking out diverse perspectives.
Yeah.
These are all powerful strategies for counteracting those automatic System 1 responses.
It seems like, the more we understand about how our minds work, the more equipped we are to navigate, all the complexities of life.
Absolutely. And that understanding extends beyond our own individual decision-making.
Okay.
It has implications for, how we design systems and policies.
Right.
Even how we interact with each other.
One example that really stood out to me was his discussion of how framing effects can influence organ donation rates.
Oh, yeah.
Simply changing the way that choice is presented can have a significant impact on people's decisions.
It's a powerful illustration of how even subtle changes in the environment, what we call nudges, can have a big impact. They can encourage people to make decisions that are in their best interest without actually limiting their freedom of choice.
It's fascinating how these insights from behavioral economics can be applied to kind of address real-world challenges and create a more positive impact
I think so.
on society.
Yeah, Kahneman's work has been really influential in so many fields.
Yeah.
Finance, marketing, healthcare, public policy.
It's really made us all kind of understand why people make the choices they do.
Right.
And how we can create systems that encourage more beneficial outcomes.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into thinking fast and slow,
Okay.
what are some key takeaways that our listeners can apply to their own lives?
I would say, one of the most important lessons is to cultivate a sense of humility about our own thinking.
Okay.
Recognize that we're all susceptible to biases.
Right.
Our decisions are not always purely rational.
Yeah.
And that, we can all benefit from slowing down,
Right.
engaging that more deliberate system two thinking.
Yeah. It's a reminder to be kind to ourselves when we inevitably make mistakes.
Absolutely.
Recognizing that we're all works in progress.
We are.
And to be more understanding of others when they make decisions that we might not agree with.
Right. Because we're all navigating this complex world with our own set of experiences and perspectives.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful sentiment. And, the more we understand about how our minds work, it seems like the more equipped we are to cultivate that empathy and compassion and really just a deeper understanding of the human experience as a whole.
Absolutely. And Thinking Fast and Slow, it's not just a book about cognitive biases. It's really an exploration of what it means to be human.
Really well said. And it's been an incredible journey exploring these ideas with you.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity about the world of behavioral economics and really the power of understanding how our minds work. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep learning. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive on